Tales of woe, and perhaps a word of warning for the team that seems to be well on its way to capturing the imagination of everybody that believes and rooting for mediocrity, to capture the imagination of everybody looking for that truly, really bad team. Okay, that's Everton this year. We've officially established that. It actually pains me greatly to say that. Because the main editor of the Zealand YouTube channel is a giant Everton fan. He took me to a League Cup match when I was in Liverpool for the Football Manager World Cup. And I happened to witness Everton's only competitive win so far this season, a win against Doncaster Rovers, where Everton ended up, winning it comfortably. It was 3-0 against a team from a couple divisions below them. So I'm incredibly happy for them. But something is happening. Something is brewing. The disaster is afoot for Everton. And where did it all go wrong? Probably spending a shitload of money on players they didn't need, running a club into debt, going into the FFP era, like a 2-year-old trying to figure out what the speed limit is, right? And just flagrantly disregarding any potential regulations that might be flying their way, and then while doing all of that, attempting to build a new stadium. Now, don't get me wrong. As somebody that has attempted to watch a game where Everton plays, there is no comfort to be found there. I'm pretty sure like Goodison Park is actually just wedged in between a couple of buildings. I mean, it really is. Like if you're queuing up to go inside the stadium, you have to stand on a street. They just have to shut the neighborhood down in order to actually hold a match there, which is a little inconvenient when you're playing a lot of matches. No, it's cool, but the reason that they're able to get so many people into the stadium is because they make the seats the size of medieval peasants, right? I was basically in the lap of the two people next to me the entire time. So I understand the compulsion that Everton has to try and build a new stadium. But what they managed to pull off this weekend is the second component to being bad, right? We know that Everton is a largely talentless team, right? Relative to the teams that they're playing against in the Premier League. It's a side that does not have a proven roster of players that you can comfortably say is going to be able to avoid relegation in the first place. That is a result of all of the things that I have already mentioned, obviously, over the course of the first, 3 minutes of this ism. But there is a second component, a component that Everton actually seems to have had kind of the opposite of for the last couple of seasons, where they were able to avoid relegation, avoid infamy, and potential financial disaster by the way of getting relegated. They managed to avoid this with showing the ability to show up in the big moments, not getting horribly unlucky. Both of those things seem to have disappeared for Everton. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm sure if you go through the last couple of seasons, Everton's accumulated, at least over the last decade, a reputation for being a team that generally bad and unlucky things happen to, and I'm sure those things have happened over the last couple of seasons. But, right, what has happened in the first 4 matches of this season has taken it to a completely other level. Because if you are going to be a really special bad team, you have that one component, mismanagement leading to a bad roster. The other component has to be there too. Just choking, like choking hazard. Heimlich maneuver won't save you amounts of choking. Unlucky, disastrous, inability to, even when things are going your way, you find a way to actually manage to just completely mess it up anyways. You've got the ball rolling in the right direction, and now all of a sudden the ball's rolling back down the hill and it hits you in the face. That is what's been happening to Everton. Let us debrief on what has happened for Everton over the course of the start of this season. Because they start the season at home with a 3-0 loss to Brighton. Now, Brighton-Tottenham, those are two top half teams in the league, right? That's not the easiest draw to start your campaign. But they lose 3-0, including 47-year-old Ashley Young getting a red card in the 66th minute. Though they were already down at that point. I just think it's funny that Ashley Young still has a role in the rotation at Everton in the Premier League, going on the age of like Joe Biden or something. I don't know. But Everton followed that up by going on the road against Tottenham, getting absolutely mollywopped. And by the way, Tottenham's played 4 matches this season, and that is their only win. I'm an Ange truther. I think they're going to be able to turn that around. I think Tottenham's a pretty good team, but it is still their only win at this early point in the season, and it was against Everton, and it was about as convincing as a win could possibly be. Cue the win against Doncaster Rovers that was maybe some sort of get-right win, although it did take in fairness, it did take Everton a little while to actually be able to pull that off. It was 0-0 at halftime. It was a very disgruntled stadium atmosphere that I happened to be sitting in before the 3 goals came. Iliman Ndiaye, by the way, scored an absolutely brilliant goal in that game. I don't know what he's been up to the rest of the time, but Everton did look like a Premier League team playing an inferior opponent over the last 45 minutes of that match, which is something that maybe you would have assumed they wouldn't be able to do based off of the way that they'd performed so far this season. But what those 3 matches show us in totality is the first thing. And I've made lots of videos about Everton's terrible financial situation and horrible mismanagement. They basically can't make any major transfers for like 3 or 4 years to try and balance out their financial situation, and they have to manage to not get relegated in the meantime, which they've managed to pull off for the last couple of years, which, look, full credit to them. It is going to be a lot harder once you achieve the second part of total mediocrity, because then you're playing at home against Bournemouth. And I'll be completely honest with you. If you see Bournemouth on a Premier League schedule, if you are a team that reasonably expects to be a Premier League regular, that has to be a win. Home or away, but especially at home, especially when you've lost your first 2 matches and you've upped that sense of urgency to, hey, let's not all lose our jobs here. That sense of urgency is there, and it was there, because Everton, of course, took a 2-0 lead. 50th minute, Michael Keane. 57th minute, Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And then in a moment that could end up being the crucial inflection point in the entire season, they just melted away. 3 goals, including a 96th minute winner for Luis Sinisterra, melted away. Right? And look, there is no other explanation for giving up a 2-goal lead with less than 10 minutes to go, including the stoppage time, than a lack of mental fortitude and or tactical structure. Right? This was a match that you were winning. You were winning comfortably. You lost focus. You didn't stay sharp. You didn't stay committed enough. You thought it was already over, and then boom, it's gone. And then once the pressure gets ramped up by a goal or even 2 goals, you feel like you're running uphill on ice, and you start sliding back down the hill. You don't have the ability to kind of turn it around. Then you just sprinkle in a little bit of misfortune, that sort of misfortune that makes those truly spectacularly bad teams, and you end up with this situation. And the reason that I would call this an inflection point that it looks like could tank the entire season for Everton is this might have sapped any belief that this club had that they were going to be able to turn it around. Now, normally I wouldn't be so lacking in optimism, but there was a field test for this. Okay. Because Everton played at Aston Villa this past weekend, which is why I'm here. It's why I'm making this ism now, and you probably know what happened, but just in case you don't. Everton scored an early goal. It was a gift. Terrible giveaway by Amadou Onana, which, look, the irony is thick there. Amadou Onana was just sold to Aston Villa from Everton, right? He's only been on Aston Villa for a couple weeks. He give away. Dwight McNeil picks him clean, and Dwight McNeil's one of those guys that can give you just a few goals over the course of the season that really come out of absolutely nowhere. And he hits this ball perfectly, right, and scores it, and it's magnificent. It's a brilliant goal. It's the exact type of goal. Even the announcer said at the time it was against the run of play, right? It's the exact type of goal that you're hoping you're able to score and then kind of batten down the hatches. And then they get another one, right? A terrible line set up on a set piece by Aston Villa. One of their players gets pushed deeper to move that offside line backwards so that Dominic Calvert-Lewin's onside. It's basically an alley-oop, if you watch basketball type goal, and he just knocks it in, and it's 2-0. I mean, Aston Villa's playing poorly. Everton's winning things in the margins, right? They're getting outplayed. Of course they are. Aston Villa's a better team than Everton is, but on the day, right, Dwight McNeil's able to produce the type of goal that he can score a few times this season, and Aston Villa makes a terrible mistake, and Calvert-Lewin's able to score it. And that's it. Except it wasn't, because somehow the moment that Everton takes a 2-goal lead, it feels inevitable that Aston Villa is going to pull off the comeback. I mean, immediately Aston Villa starts to create chances. Everton looks shaky. They're missing assignments. I don't know if it's tactical, or I don't know if it's just certain players on Everton not being able to process what's going on, but I mean, people just getting open, right? And eventually Ollie Watkins is able to score. I mean, it took 9 minutes, but it felt like Aston Villa was really close for the majority of that 9 minutes to pulling 1 goal back. And once that 1 goal is scored, there's a feeling that it's just kind of seeded that what was going to happen, what was always going to happen. It was the only possible option It was the only possible outcome because Aston Villa laid siege to the Everton goal for the rest of this match, right? And that is probably the way we should have expected this match to go. But the chances as the match went on got more and more obvious. It's cruel and painful for Everton that John Duran scored maybe one of the goals of the season to actually put Aston Villa in the lead, right? But all you need to do is click on a highlight reel from this game to know that Aston Villa could have scored 6 goals. That Ollie Watkins, missed 2 different other goals outside the 2 he scored by a toe, right? Like it was glorious domination from Aston Villa. And even then, Everton had a chance. And this is where you know that something's just kind of off up here for Everton. Because even though Aston Villa they were pressing a lot, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin got in on goal all alone. All alone. He had a chance to put them up 3-1. It would have completely changed the complexion of the game, and he didn't take it confidently. He gives a half-hearted effort to try and round the keeper. Ezra Konsa is actually able to run back and get in the play and literally clear the touch away. He didn't even get a shot off. And then at a later point, he actually creates another chance from an angle because Aston Villa's... I actually had no idea what was happening in this instance. Villa was up 3-2, but Calvert-Lewin creates a chance at an angle and then bangs it right off the crossbar. That was unlucky. That was Everton's chance. But Everton had legitimately 2 actual chances in this game. Those 2 chances. They didn't go in the back of the net. Right? In the way that these 2 matches have now happened are so soul-crushing. I don't know where Everton goes from here, and I'm gonna pass off a word of warning, right? That we've seen something like this before. The last couple of years, Everton has fallen from a team that was mid-table, a team, when Tim Howard was there that could maybe even make it into Europe. They have rotted their way into the bottom third of the table. And in the last couple of years, they've managed to just barely keep their head above water, right? I mean, in some instances, coming down to the last day, right? Being able to keep their head above water, staying in the Premier League. In some cases, surprisingly staying in the Premier League. But they are, in many ways, stuck in neutral, which is incredibly dangerous in the Premier League because if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. And Everton's not been able to make huge, meaningful additions to the team to replenish itself the way that a lot of other Premier League clubs are able to replenish themselves, right? And losing players like Amadou Onana is always, a part of that. Right. And they got a guy back who he was like player of the match in the match that I went to, but he was playing against Doncaster Rovers. I don't remember what his name was. I don't know if he played. Eric Bunam, he got subbed out in this match. Him and Idrissa Gueye, who are both basically like space-eating, ball-controlling type midfielders. They look like carbon copies of one another when I was watching them play. Right. But I think Amadou Onana is a better player. Right. And so that's where Everton's been. This reminds me of Sunderland. That's the point I'm trying to make. You remember when Sunderland spent years, big traditional English club that had been in the top flight for a long time, spent years barely not getting relegated. But it's almost like not getting relegated hid the actual issues, right? It was able to continue rotting until eventually it was just impossible to stay in the Prem. And that rot was obviously so bad at Sunderland, they pulled off the infamous double relegation down to League One, right? And it feels like we're watching the same thing happen with Everton, where now the razor-thin margins aren't going their way. And it's continued to rot, and now you don't know if the team has the ability to pull itself back up by its bootstraps for the umpteenth time to try and stay in the Premier League again, which is the expectation of that fan base, but so is Sunderland. And they're still not back. This is dangerous territory for Everton. And I hope I'm wrong, honestly, for my editor's sake. And, I got to go watch a match there, and the people were great and everything. But it's feeling like that. And I'm worried for them because not only are they bad, but the football gods are against them now. And they're getting the biggest mental test that they've gotten in a long time. And brother, it is still September. This is going to be a long season on the blue side of Merseyside, right? And I would be very surprised if they manage to turn this around. But Sean Dyche is the type of guy, if there's one guy fire and brimstone, right, that has proven his ability to keep teams in the Premier League. Maybe he can get the mind right, but you need to get the mind right soon because you drop too many more matches to the Bournemouths of the world, then you can kiss the whole Premier League thing goodbye.